This will be making a basic graph in the new version of Excel. So let's say I had some data for something. I took some temperature points at different times of some object and watched it cool down. And so I'm going to have some time and temperature data. I want to make a graph. So first thing I want to do is actually put in the data. Notice this is cell A1, and I'm just going to type in the word time. And if I hit enter, notice the box moves down. If I would have typed in time and hit the tab button, it moves over to the side. And in this box, I want to put temperature. So I'm going to type it in. And notice that the word temperature is actually too big for this column. So there's a bunch of ways to fix this. I'm going to go by the way that I like to do it, the way that might be the quickest. If I just move my cursor over to the middle of the B and the C, and notice it changes what it looks like. So if I just double click at the B and the C, and now it's resized the column for me. Okay, now putting in the time points. Let's say I took time points over 15 minutes. So I need the numbers 1 through 15 in here. I could actually enter all of them in manually. Like I'll put the 1 in manually, just type the number 1 and hit enter. But for the rest of them, now it might be quicker when you don't have many time points to actually put them in 1 through 15 manually. But there is a trick you can do, especially when you have a lot of points to put in. If I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, notice as I go down, every box is one number higher. Like right here, this should be a 2, so the 2 is one higher than 1. If I go here, this box would be a 3. 3 is one number higher than 2. It's a pattern. So instead of me actually typing in the number 2 here, I'm going to type in as equals. And I'm going to click on the box above it that has the 1. And when I do that, notice it's putting in a formula for me here. It's box A2. This is column A, row 2. And this box should be whatever A2 is, but it should be one number higher. So I'm going to type in a plus and 1 and hit enter. And it put the 2 in for me. If I left click on that cell, notice it's got my formula back the way I entered it. Alright, so now I want to get the other numbers in there. I'm going to do what's called a fill down, and this is actually a very helpful technique in Excel. If I move my cursor to the lower right hand corner of that cell, notice it turns into that black plus. I'm going to click and drag with the left mouse button all the way down to about where I think the 15 would be, and then I'll let go, and it fills it in for me and does all the work. Okay, the temperature points, I'm going to actually have to enter in by hand because there's not going to be any set pattern here whatsoever. You know, I didn't actually take these temperature time data, but let's just say I did. You'll notice there might be an actual pattern in the data I'm putting in, but you know, that never happens in an actual science class. So let's just say this is what I got. It turns out they're going to be pretty nice data. Okay, I want to graph these points. And there might be a bunch of different ways to actually make this graph, but I'm going to do a way that might show you if you had a bunch of different points or try to get you past maybe some more complex situations. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up here to this Insert tab, and notice there's a bunch of graphs here that I can choose from. In science, you should always plot your data as points. There shouldn't be any lines in the graph unless you're trying to use a mathematical model or trying to fit some sort of line to your data afterwards. But other than that, there should never be any lines connecting your data. You know, sometimes you might see like the connect the dots graphs. We don't want those in science class anymore. So what I like to use is this XY scatter. Left click on that and it gives you some options. Again, we don't really want any of these lines here yet, so I'm going to just go with the one that plots the points. And what Excel did was it found all my data and stuff for me. And that happens sometimes. Sometimes it figures out, okay, this is what needs to be graphed, but I'm going to act like it didn't. So what I'm doing right now, okay, let's say it just brings up this box. Now, if it figured it out, we could have started from there and moved on. But let's just say it brings up this box, which it often does. It can't figure out what I want to plot. So I need to tell it, okay, here's what you actually put in there. Notice there's under this Chart Tools Design tab, there's a button called Select Data. I'm just going to click on that, and it brings up this box. I want to add a data set, so I'm going to hit Add, and now I get another box. Let's just call this, I don't know, temperature. And I need to put my X values in. Well, here they are right here. The easiest way to do that is to click on this box here with the left mouse button. And I'm just going to click with my left mouse button, click and hold, and then I'm going to drag so I highlight all my X values. Notice it puts in the stuff to enter into this box for me. Also notice I did not highlight the word time. If you highlight the words, it's going to throw off the program. So now I've got my X values there. I'm just going to hit the enter button, and I have my X values entered in. I need to do the similar process, clicking this box and highlighting my Y values, making sure I don't highlight the temperature word. And there it goes. It put all my data in. And hit OK. Alright, one thing that is often put in there, ignore what I'm doing right now, is grid lines. Often it'll put those in there. And why it did for me, I don't know. I think it's because I already deleted them. But those are things that we like to get rid of. So they don't really help to the graph. They kind of make the graph look a little bit messy. So here's what we'll do. I'll just left click on one of the grid lines. Oh, making sure the grid lines are highlighted. There we go. And I'm just going to hit the delete button. Grid lines are gone. I'm also going to try to resize this graph a little bit. So if I move the cursor to this corner, I can click and hold with my left mouse button. I can drag any sort of shape that I might want. Alright, some more stuff to do to clean up this graph. Notice there's this big white space here. Well, why don't I use the whole graph? So if I just left click on the chart area, I get a box, move the cursor to this thing here, and I can drag the stuff over so I actually use up more of the space. Notice my key is getting a little bit in the way, so I'm just going to left click on that box. I'm going to move that just up a little bit so it's out of the way. Okay, we're missing some stuff. We probably need to have some axes labels. Also, my title doesn't look that great. If I just left click on the title and left click again, it puts the cursor in there, and I can type in, maybe make a little bit better title for my graph. Now, the axis labels are a little bit trickier. I got to go under chart tools. I believe it's the layout tab, and I have a lot of options here I can mess with. There is one called axis titles. I'll left click on that. I'll put in the X axis first. And I just click on title below the axis. I'm just going to type in what it is, and it's time. And I'm not going to forget to put in my units. I'll put it in like that. And I need to do the exact same thing for the y-axis. I know there's several options here. I usually just like this first option here. And I'll type in temperature. And hit enter, and there you go. It put in my units. If you get fonts that are too small, of course, you could have that box highlighted. We can change the fonts to anything that we think might be a little bit better. Those are some things that we could do. Same thing with the numbers here. Speaking of numbers, I'm going to clean this up a little bit more. Excel has the habit of putting in regions that you don't necessarily need. My highest point's 100, and my lowest point here on the y value is 30, I believe, at 30 degrees. So I don't really need this 0 to 20, and I don't really need this 100 to 20. I'm going to make this axis go from 20 to 100. So here's what I could do. I can left click on that axis, and while my cursor is there, I'm going to right click, and it brings up this format axis box. That takes a little practice, because if you click a little bit off, you got to left click on that axis. So under format axis, I have several options, but one thing I'm going to do is here's my minimum. It says it's auto at 0. I'm going to make it fixed at 20. I'm just going to type it in. And maximum, I'm going to make it fixed at 100. And that's going to make my graph look a little bit better. I'm going to use that space a little bit better. The other thing I want to do now is maybe add a line. So like I said, we don't normally have lines on scientific graphs. We don't normally play connect the dots, even though I gave you cooked up numbers. So this is actually going to connect the dots when I put a line in. The line is just going to be some sort of mathematical model that I want to see how well I can fit my data. In real life, you're not going to get nice data like I just have here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to left click on any data point, and then I'm going to right click. And I have this option here that says add trend line. So I'll just left click on that, and I've got several options. Notice it picked linear for me, but let's say I didn't have nice linear data. I could check and see which one of these might fit the data the best. Obviously, for me, linear is the best, so I'm going to keep that. And if I want to display the equation on chart, I can click that box, and here's the equation. And if I want the r squared value, I can click that too, or if I don't want that. So I'm going to leave the trend line in the equation as is, and I'll hit close. And I don't really care for this equation right now where it is. I'll move it a little bit. I'm going to make the font a little bit bigger so I can come up here and I can just click, making sure the box is highlighted. I can kind of see which one I like. Let's go with 11 point. And the other pet peeve I guess I have with Excel graphs is people leave this and they turn in this graph to me. I'm not plotting y versus x. I'm plotting temperature and time. So I want to actually go in here and change this. So if I have the box highlighted, I can just left click on it once more. It puts the cursor in. Let me just erase this y and type in what's actually on my y-axis, which is temperature. And let me go over to the x. What's actually on the x-axis is time. And I'm going to put that in there. And Excel is not maybe the best graphs ever, but it's probably the easiest. And this is one way that we could have a nice cleaned up graph. The last thing that I don't really care for, this is a personal thing of mine, is in this key. Notice it says linear temperature. I don't like that. I'm just going to click on the key box, and I'm going to click on linear once more. Just hit delete, and that's gone. I can also increase the font size of this a little bit. And now we have a much better looking graph, and this would be good for your lab reports.